Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
And welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar.
And I'm Asana Keatano.
And thank you for joining us this Tuesday morning, just in case you didn't realize it.
We're on the heels of an extended weekend.
Yeah.
Where we celebrated Labor Day yesterday. And I just want to use the opportunity to acknowledge once again everybody in the labor force.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what discipline or what career you're involved with. As long as you're a worker, then happy belated at this point. Happy belated Labor Day.
Absolutely. We hope you spent it with minimal labor, but we know some people were still on duty as things still have to keep functioning. And it came well timed too, because very often after Easter or after any holiday, people say, oh, I need a vacation after my vacation. This was your opportunity there to be able to do that.
Yes.
There is, of course, quite a bit to discuss about what took place over the weekend. We'll be getting into that in just a few in Eye on the News. And I do want to, of course, let you know that I'm happy to be back. I took April. April was here for April.
Yes, for the month of April.
And
yes.
It was... it was great to see her on the air and also to be able to take some extra rest time as well.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes.
But we got to get moving into some of our housekeeping. Of course, we're going to start you off this Tuesday morning. We know it's always a tough one after a long weekend with some motivation to get you going for the day. So we're going to get into our eye opener. And our eye opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. Create a soft place to land in your home, a refuge from the stress of the day. Our day-to-day demands can quickly take their toll on our well-being if we are not vigilant about caring for ourselves as best we can. One way we can ensure that we have an opportunity to relax and recuperate each day is to create a soft place to land when we arrive home. This landing pad, whether it is an entire room or merely a small corner of a larger area, can provide us with a safe and comforting refuge in which we can decompress and recover from the day's stresses. There, we are enveloped in feelings of security that transcend other issues that may be unfolding in our homes. Our landing pads also act as way stations that enable us to shift our attention away from our outer world concerns and back to our inner world needs. The soft place to land that you create should inspire within you the mantra, I can breathe here. I can relax here. I know I am safe here. When you return to your home after braving worldly rigors, you will feel a subtle yet tranquil shift occur inside of you as you settle into this most personal of retreats and feel centered once again.
What I love about this eye-opener is the fact that it speaks to a certain sanctuary, so to speak, where at home you create a space like a haven.
Yeah.
Where you can always retreat to either after work or when you need personal time, or even if it is just to have perhaps a one-on-one conversation with someone in your little area.
Yeah.
The fact that I'm an outdoors person, for me, I've created a space where I can sit after work, or in the morning I could just have a seat and just, either admire nature or just look at people walking by, but it creates a certain feeling.
Yeah.
It's almost meditative. right? And in the evening, if I go home, it does the same thing. Like I can unwind, like before having to deal with the kids or with family, I could just sit there, take a 5 minutes, and just kind of recalibrate, right? It allows me to do that. But from a larger point of view, being able to have a respite, like a go-to place, allows you to be able to reset. It allows you to be able to think. It allows you to be able to, plan ahead and things like that. And very often, we don't create that kind of space. We operate in a communal setting, but we don't carve out a little area that says, okay, this is my den, or this is my man cave, or your personal office, or whatever it is that is the sanctuary.
It's interesting because the one thing that comes to mind for me, and it's not so much a problem here, but as the world starts to return back to the common or the regular work hours, one of the concerns that seems to have come out from this whole work from home era is how the idea of separating your personal and professional life became very muddy. And, because we use our home as a place very often to replenish ourselves.
Yes.
And so when you're doing both in one space, it can very often become a mixed bag of what you're tackling at any given time.
The line gets blurred between, work and recreation, or work and home.
Yeah. So I thought of that, but that isn't something I think that we had widespread throughout Belize. But in today's reality and in what we know about households in Belize, it probably is not possible for everybody to be able to have their own space, as in their own bedroom or a dedicated space for each individual in the home, even sometimes for the parents or adults. But I think what is key is that you do allow from adults to children to kind of carve out their own little corner, and we seek it either way. I remember as a kid, like finding one little corner in the house that you could use, whether you want to read a book or play with your stuff alone when you don't want to play with your siblings, and you naturally gravitate towards finding something that is just yours. So as I read the eye-opener, I think to myself that people will clearly say, well, I can't dedicate a whole room. Well, find a space that works for you, and especially for mothers who pretty much can't escape the children. It's carving out that little corner of space where you can just, exactly as the eye-opener say, take that time to breathe.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent eye-opener.
That is our eye-opener for this morning. And with that, we're going to find out more about our weather for today. We have Francisca on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am very confused about our weather, Francisca. I've been wanting to ask you what is going on.
Seems like a wet, dry season, right?
Yeah.
I always gear up for April saying, okay, the 100-degree weather is coming, or feel like 100 now. And then we just had lots of rain.
Yes. We've been having some moisture coming in from the Caribbean. And it comes like in pockets, because if you notice, during the course of the day, we get showers, and then nighttime it eases up. So that's what's been happening.
Okay. So what are we expecting for today?
So we'll see sunny skies, but we'll also see some cloudy spells, and we'll also see a few showers. And I'm seeing it especially over the southern areas along the coast, and then moving inland.
All right, so that's our 24-hour forecast. What about our winds?
Okay, so the winds are out of the east, 10 to 20 knots, producing choppy seas, and that will support 3 to 5 feet waves beyond the reef.
And those temperatures?
Okay, maximum this afternoon along the coast, 86, inland 92, and the Maya Mountains, 80. And then overnight temperatures, 80 along the coast, 73 inland, and 67 up in the Maya Mountains.
All right. And the extended forecast, what's the rest of the week shaping up to look like?
Okay, Wednesday night, I'm seeing even more moisture coming in. So again, we'll be seeing a few showers, even isolated thunderstorms Wednesday and Wednesday night. Thursday, that should become confined to the south, and then Friday and Saturday I'm seeing isolated showers decreasing.
All right, so we're going to have a bit more rain tomorrow.
That's right. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay. Well, we've been warned. Thank you so much for that update.
You're welcome.
You have a great day.
Thanks, and you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, so back to some showers tomorrow. So
Yeah.
we enjoyed the weekend fairly dry.
You
but
know, it
we're-
got cloudy for moments that I thought, okay, rain is coming. It just seems like they always explain to us isolated thunderstorms, and you know, you may get a pocket of rain here or there, and that seems to be a daily occurrence now.
You know, I was telling some folks earlier that it seems a bit unseasonal, this kind of rainfall that we're experiencing. While there's, you know, moisture in the air, April is known for, you know, being very dry and humid, not necessarily wet. We look forward to that in June and, you know, the later months of the year, but not necessarily at this time.
Yeah, when those rains started early April, everybody was like, but it's April. What is going on? You know, I guess climate scientists especially are perhaps pointing out just how much our weather patterns are changing. It is not unique to us. I was reading yesterday about India and Pakistan having record high temperatures. Their heat wave, I think in some cases, their temperatures are as high as 114 degrees. So they're closing schools because it is just too hot. So, you know, if our hearts go out to them, but I think it is, we see it each year where the patterns that we once had established seem to be no longer.
Everything seems a bit topsy-turvy when you look
Yeah.
at the weather and, you know, the idea of climate change and what have you. Things that we were used to, like, for instance, if I recall as a child, in December or January, you're having cold fronts without rain,
Yeah.
where it's naturally chillier, cold. Now, the rain quickly dissipates any kind of a front.
And even how cold it gets. Our cold fronts used to, at least in my memory, used to be chillier.
Yeah.
Now they're just, you know, they're comfortable to move around. We haven't had those dips where you start to see people pulling out their beanie hats and jackets and.
It feels like that's a thing of the past.
It does. It does. You know, somebody somewhere is probably blaming COVID, but in general, I think the reality that we're seeing is that, you know, the world is changing for good and bad. We've seen a 100-year, a pandemic that has not taken place in over 100 years. We're seeing changes in weather patterns, and it just is, as human beings, we have to constantly adapt to or changing environments.
That's a good message.
Speaking of COVID, though, I was telling you as you came in, this was a weekend where we saw people really letting loose. We saw it earlier in Easter, but I saw some videos of some of the events over the weekend, and I've not seen crowds like that since pre-pandemic.
Well, my humble opinion here, I'm glad that we're able to return to a sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
After having felt as if though we've been cooped up for the better part of 2 years.
Yeah.
However, there's still some social responsibility that goes along with being able to be out and about and enjoying the things that we once were able to freely.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, notwithstanding the fact that the regulations have been relaxed considerably, that we're still being responsible in terms of our movements and in terms of being able to keep a certain distance, etc. I know that we don't need to wear a mask per se, but still, if we could maintain social distance, at least that.
And I still wear my mask when I'm going into settings where I see a lot of people and there's no allowance for social distancing, because I do realize that the responsibility is now 100% upon you as the individual, how much you want to protect yourself and how much you want to protect those around you. But it is interesting because when you see, one, we're still detecting cases. The numbers are less than 100. They've been inching, I would say, up, but not significantly.
I would describe it as like a fair fluctuation.
Yeah.
It's not too high, it's not too low, it's you know.
I don't even think it's gone above 50 cases per day.
It
But
hasn't.
it doesn't mean that the risk isn't removed from it. And so last week we saw the Ministry of Health call for older persons, I think it's over 60, to go out and get their second booster shot. And that's a very important reminder to make for people, because we know that as you get older, your immune system just isn't as strong as when you're younger. And what might be just a sniffle or slight congestion if a younger person gets COVID, can be really devastating for people who are older. So that advisory is out there. You can go out and get your second booster shot if you've already gotten your first.
On the heels of that too, though, the CEO for KHMH also came out to say that while it feels as if though the pandemic is behind us, they still remain in some preparatory mode because we're still not clear and we're still not certain of what could happen going forward.
And you know, we don't even have to look very far. We just have to see what's happening in other parts of the world where the latest strain, it is causing a rise in cases in other countries. The only silver lining in that is that it is significantly milder than what the previous variants had brought before. Doesn't mean that everybody should get it, because let's not forget what it felt like in that Omicron wave when you were facing, it was like a mass sick out and everybody was down to a skeleton staff. So it doesn't mean that you want to just ignore the fact that that variant exists or that it's milder, or just dismiss it because it's milder, but also consider that you do want to minimize spread no matter what.
I was reading up fairly recently, perhaps it would have been Friday or Saturday, the complete lockdown in certain parts of China, like Shanghai, for instance, where it's like a flashback to early 2020 when they were, you know, all of these measures that were put in place and people were kept in. The streets are completely abandoned and vacant. It's like, you know, not we, but they're back to that place where they begun from.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange to still see severe measures being used like that. They have their own reasons as to why. But I just think it's important that we don't forget that we are still technically living in the pandemic. It hasn't been declared over. I know Fauci had mentioned something similar and people ran with it, and then he issued a clarification. He just said it's a new phase of the pandemic. And
it's
that's
like a
where
recess, if you want to describe it as such.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's not the torrential rain, it's like the full rain, where you could still move about and not get too wet.
But you'll get sick nonetheless, right?
But you could still get
I believe
sick.
it's described as the mohawk. It's the kind of rain, the fine drizzle that gets you sick nonetheless.
Yeah, so I think we could think of it that way. It's not that we don't need our umbrellas to get through it. But of course, that's only some of what took place last week. It's a great opportunity for us to talk about some of the big stories coming out from last week and what we are looking forward to in the week ahead. So we're going to shift gears to Eye on the News.
So there are two topics that I wanted to touch on this morning. Both of which carry over from last week.
Yeah.
For the past several weeks, we've been discussing the concerted effort on the part of the churches to be able to garner the requisite number of signatures that would be used to trigger a referendum. And this is in respect of the cannabis legislation.
Yeah.
So, I believe it would have been Thursday of last week, if I'm not mistaken, where the frontman, in a manner of speaking, for this particular movement, Pastor Louis Wade, gave us an update to say that this morning at 10 a.m., they are going to be going to Belize House in Belmopan, where they will present Governor General Furlat Salam with a sheaf of documents containing 20,000 signatures. And so this will be led by the church senator, Bishop Moses Bengoche, and he will be flanked by other members from other denominations as well, as a show of support for this particular movement. Now, it comes on the heels of the Bar Association of Belize also presenting a paper, a 17-page document in which they did not necessarily take any side for or against, but they presented the facts and they looked at some of the concerns being brought by, in this case, the church as well, right? As well as the fact that if we are to have a referendum, if one is granted, that the results may not necessarily be binding. So notwithstanding the fact that we go to the polls and vote for the passage of this particular vote, the government can itself still go ahead and move with the cannabis legislation in place.
So yes, there is of course some major. This is of course a major development, and we will be covering that in our newscast tonight to see exactly how much effort went into getting those 20,000
Yes.
signatures. We know that of course they had acquired signatures at first, but they have to be vetted, as we've
Yes.
learned in previous referendum examples, that they have to be vetted that they are in fact registered voters.
Well, they had to go through that exercise. When they thought that they had met the threshold, when
Yeah.
they did their due diligence, they realized that some of the signatures weren't people who were registered voters.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm assuming that they have done the due diligence this time around, and so the 20,000 signatures that they have amassed would now be of registered voters. So this is, I think, the next step, as seeing how the government is going to respond is going to be interesting. What we have heard from government officials so far about it being too little too late, essentially, is one, I think, that is a valid point. However, when you do have people who are awakened into developing this position and you're able to get 20,000 people to pen their names to it,
Yeah.
I don't think it's as easy to dismiss, because those are voters, and those are voters with valid concerns.
Well, to an extent, there seems to be some mixed message being put out there by the government, because when we speak with the Minister of New Growth Industries, he was saying that the attempt on the part of the church is belated,
Yeah.
in that the legislation had already been passed and ratified and what have you. But then you read elsewhere that it hasn't necessarily been ratified. While the upper house has given its consent, it hasn't been passed into law based on the actual process that is left. But beyond that, when the Prime Minister was asked about this very same issue last weekend in Orange Walk, he was saying, well, basically we have to respect the churches, we have to, be able to work with them, etc. So it doesn't necessarily give a clear position.
Yeah.
No, we're not, or yes, we are.
Yeah.
It's up there in the air.
Well, with the submission for the referendum, I'm sure that will force them to decide how they're going to move forward. The question I have, though, is what are the primary concerns of the 20,000 who have voted and those who do support, even if they haven't signed, those who do support the referendum? Because, saying that you want to go to a referendum before significant changes are made to this legislation, well, there's a lot of changes that can take place. And I know that it has been expressed primarily by government officials that it is already decriminalized. The possession of 10 grams of marijuana is already decriminalized. And so being able to identify the gap between how you acquire is what they're hoping to be able to address, which, I think makes a lot from the point when there was the decriminalization, we spoke of how ludicrous it was that you can have something, but you can't legally acquire it anywhere. So it's like you can have the proceeds of an illegal act, but you can't
participate in the illegal act.
Actually getting it. So it does show that there is a significant gap that has to be addressed. And so when I hear the question of the referendum, when I hear the conversations about the referendum, the question I hone in on is, okay, what do you actually want to have input on? Are you hoping to undo the past decriminalization where marijuana is illegal across the board all over again? Or is it about how the sale of marijuana will then proceed? Or cannabis, I should say.
I'll take off my journalism hat for a second and kind of share my thought as a civilian, so to speak. First of all, marijuana is present everywhere. As a child, I could recall, you know, the smell of marijuana smoke in the neighborhood, going to school, or wherever you are. Then I recall, as a young man living abroad, a majority of the college kids that I went to school with, that was their thing. Then I come back and enter professional life, and we're looking at it from a different point of view, but it's still very much present in society, and it doesn't matter where you go. And so I say that to say this. When I look at the issue of marijuana consumption, and I look at, for instance, parenting, or if I look at productivity, right? Even if it's not from the point of view where you're raising kids or whatever, but you're looking at it from being able to function in a work environment or being able to function in an academic setting, right? Those are some of the considerations that I have. So that if we're looking at a possible referendum, there will be a question being put to the voting public, right? So if you're looking at all of, and I'm just raising my own concerns, right? Other members of the church and the clergy have their own concerns. The regular person out there has his or her own concern. How do we formulate a question to ask that is all-encompassing of all of those concerns?
Yeah, because I do hear from some of the people expressing that concern. It's almost an undoing of what was already put in law before. And that takes us back to the decriminalization that is already established. You know, I hear the concerns about early drug use. And I think anything that we introduce into our body in excessive amounts can cause damage. And that's from, you know, sugar to salt.
If you eat a lot of potatoes, potatoes are going to have an adverse effect on you.
So there are all these legitimate concerns about effects that can take place. So there's an education that has to come along with it, awareness, and of course control measures. But I agree with you. I think the point of the referendum now is looking at, one, how government responds after this has been submitted, whether or not it will be executed, and what is the question that we need answered at this point?
So I'm glad that we can punctuate that there by saying, okay, so at 10 o'clock there will be a press conference immediately following the submission of the signatures, right? But we will need to press government thereafter to see what's the next move. So we'll have to keep that in mind.
There can also be a people's referendum. Don't forget that when Oceana at the time under Audrey Matura couldn't get the referendum going, they did the people's referendum instead.
Well, again, it reminds us that at the end of the day, the results of it may not necessarily be binding for the government of the day, because you know, you could do that and they go about doing what they've set out to do nonetheless. The other topic that I wanted to touch on, and I don't really want to preempt too much what's going to be in the body of the show proper, but the issue of the public officer who was suspended from work in the wake of this fiasco with the importation of plants into the country and the call that was made by the Prime Minister. I know that the Public Service Union has its position, and I also know that the leader of the United Democratic Party, came forward on Friday, I believe it was, to also share his position on the matter. Now, there are several schools of thought with respect to what took place there. Some would say, if you're able to call in a particular request from the highest office in the land, that the persons who are tasked with carrying out that particular request only needed to be able to document the processes that were taken as a matter that whoever comes back and asks, look, this was the call, it came in at a certain time, these were the steps that I took, A, B, C. That's one way of looking at it, one school of thought. The other is to say, well, look, there shouldn't have been that level of interference to begin with, right? And they would argue that it's the kind of meddling, so to speak, that leads to corruption. Because you're circumventing a system that is in place that allows for things to remain transparent, for things to remain as clear as possible in terms of the procedures that ought to have been taking place. And so looking at it from that point, it remains very much a topic to discuss, right? And I'll leave that there because I know that coming up we will get into that proper.
Yeah, I think the key question is how could it have been handled? Is there a process in place? And we're going to be diving into that into our first conversation with the Public Service Union this morning. They also have a new grievance manual which outlines some of these things, but also hearing, you know, I think there were missteps on both parts, and we're going to get some details about that as well. But it has definitely captured the attention of the public for the simple fact that it shows two things. One, when there is intervention from people in higher authority, and how do you respond to that when it happens?
Yeah. All right, so again, these are the topics that we're going to be looking forward to at 6 o'clock this evening. There were other events that took place as well, including road traffic accidents and a murder in Belize City. We'll have all of those details for you this evening at 6 o'clock on News 5 Live. And you can catch our content on social media via YouTube and Facebook.
All right, and as we said, we're going to get moving into our show for today. And this morning, our conversation with the Public Service Union, we're going to be talking about the recently penned grievance manual. This is a collaborative effort between the unions and the government, and we're going to get the details about how they put it together, what it means, and how public servants can use it.
And our second conversation, it's Animal Health Week.
Yes.
And so we'll be joined by a pair of veterinarians who are going to share with us what we need to know about our pets and, you know, taking care of them and all the things that we need to do to keep them healthy.
Yeah. All right, so that is what we have in store for you this morning. We're going to go ahead and take that first break. When we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the Public Service Union. So please, stay tuned.
After a rough week of school, Jake and his friends decide to treat themselves to frozen coffee. And since they don't have cash on them, they decide to use eCash. With eCash's geolocation feature, Jake can easily find the nearest coffee spot. With eCash's built-in option to split bills, Jake can pay the bill and his friends can reimburse their portion of the bill. Jake scans the merchant's code and confirms payment. Jake then views his transaction history and taps on the transaction recently made, then taps the Split the Bill button where he selects the Evenly option to evenly split the bill. The application splits the bill automatically. His friends receive and accept the request. Geolocation and splitting the bill via eCash makes Jake enjoy his digital lifestyle.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special Smart Stream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with Smart Stream.
Galenia Hospital, located in Cancun, Mexico's premier tourism destination, is a state-of-the-art healthcare facility that provides highly specialized medical services. We are Quintana Roo's biggest private hospital with board-certified doctors and staff. Some of our services include cath lab, adult intensive care unit, neonatal intensive care unit, emergency rooms, operating theaters, ambulance services, and more. We are a medically accredited hospital by JCI, Accreditation Canada International, and General Health Council, providing extraordinary care in every specialty, from our cardiology department to our neurology center. We are focused on treating the entire person, body, mind, and spirit. Contact us at medicaltourism@hospitalgalenia.com or visit our website at www.hospitalgalenia.com. Come to Galenia Hospital in Cancun for a truly personal medical care experience.
Digifans, the 2022 Belize Telephone Directory is now available. Pick up your free copy at any Digistore and ENR branches countrywide. Check out our cellular, residential, and Yellow Page listings. It's the most complete guide in Belize. You can also access the directory on the go by downloading the free Find Yellow mobile app from the Google Play and Apple Store. For more info, log on to www.findyellow.com. The 2022 Belize Telephone Directory. Get your copy today.
And welcome back. Our first segment of our show this morning, as we've mentioned prior to the commercial break, is to discuss with the Public Service Union, the representatives of the PSU, the Grievance Manual, and of course, we're also going to be touching on the topic that we've been following for the past week, which has to do with the public officer who has been placed on leave. That being said, however, we have with us in studio this morning the Legal Counsel for the Public Service Union, Jacqueline Willoughby. Good morning.
Good morning.
We also have with us the Industry Relations Officer, Calbert Barber.
Morning.
Good morning, folks. Good morning. So let's begin first of all with the hot button issue that everyone has been following for the past few days, and this has to do with the actions that have been taken in the wake of a phone call that a public officer received while on duty last weekend with the importation of plants into the country, and of course what took place between that individual and the Prime Minister from whom the call came. From your perspective as a legal mind and as someone who has been in the Public Service Union for all these many years, share with us, Jackie, your position on this incident, the way it's been handled.
Let me correct you first of all.
Sure.
I'm not the legal counsel for the union.
Okay.
I'm a paying union member, has been for 33 years.
Okay.
And I'm a trade unionist at heart. So I sit here in this chair today, not necessarily as a legal counsel. I do sit here as a trade unionist and a member of the Public Service Union. I do not have the full details because I have not read the file, but of the little that I could have heard from what the Prime Minister said on television, I find that it was really bashful for the Prime Minister to have gotten on television and speak about calling a public officer. With the greatest respect, he's not an accounting officer. In accordance with the Constitution, the accounting officer for the ministry is the CEO. It simply meant that if the PM wanted to advance, here Mr. Mai, wanted to advance any instructions, it would have had to be advanced to the CEO, who would have advanced it to the director or their HOD, and then to the officer's supervisor, and then to the officer. This is what is so wrong in the public service. Every government that has come in has used the public service as their toy and determined that when they can't get what they want done, they would manipulate and bulldoze public officers. What has happened to Mr. Chi is a travesty, and this union will ensure to stand by his side to make sure that he is not penalized for doing his job, because that's the other thing that's irritating. There is statutes that govern how plants enter this country. There are statutes. What the PM effectively did and what Minister Mai effectively did was to call Mr. Chi to ask him not to do his job. That is a travesty. Political minds need to understand they are the policy and lawmakers. It is the executive that implements these laws. Mr. Chi has a supervisor. Mr. Chi should not be receiving a phone call from neither the Prime Minister or any Minister of Cabinet. As a matter of course, if you look into our regulations, it is an offense for an officer to even approach a minister. So why should it be okay for them to call you and tell you not to do your job?
That's interesting. Let me come back a bit though, because the devil is in the details here. And what I want to know is, was this issue raised to the Public Service Union before it was publicized in the media?
That would be a question for Mr. Barber.
No, it wasn't.
So Mr. Chi never filed any complaint or expressed concern?
No. The matter came to our attention because of the interview the Prime Minister did with the media. Mr. Chi didn't approach us until he got that letter that put him on administrative leave. As Ms. Willoughby was implying, there were so many things that they did wrong. The words of the Prime Minister when he said he would contact the minister to deal with this, essentially saying that I'm going to punish you. That's trying to put fear in the public officers. Further to that, this letter that prompted Mr. Chi to come to us was, if you read it based on the letter itself, it was a punitive measure instead of an investigative measure. And you only could put a public officer on administrative leave for the purpose of an investigation. Now, this matter is a minor misconduct within our regulations.
So let's stop there. So two things that you're saying. One, that administrative leave can be used for a specific function. But let's go back to what you are saying here, that it is in fact misconduct. Under what grounds?
I'm not saying he committed a misconduct. What they're accusing him of is only a minor misconduct.
What is the accusation?
It's, I think, under 41(2)(b, something to the effect that in the manner how you treat the public, you must treat them with respect.
In this case, he's alleged to have hung up the phone on the Prime Minister.
So you were unprofessional in some way. I'm using words to try to help our viewers understand.
Technically, that's what they're accusing him of. However, the fact of the matter is, this gentleman didn't even have a phone in his hand. He couldn't have. How did the call got disconnected? He don't know. It wasn't his phone that the Prime Minister called. Yes, he had a brief conversation with the Prime Minister to tell him follow protocol, follow the rules. But for the Prime Minister to blatantly accuse him of a misconduct or being rude by hanging up the phone, it's totally unfair to the public officer.
We're working on assumptions here that that is the basis of the misconduct. But Jackie, I see your face and you're trying to figure out how to explain to us what the rules say and how it matters.
That's what I'm figuring out.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you're a mind reader.
I'm guessing.
Putting things in perspective.
Yeah.
Mr. Chi did not need to make any contact with the union until such time as he had gotten the letter. My read of the letter that he has gotten is a clear indication to me that the CEO who wrote that letter was not being properly advised. Simply because the first line in the letter says, putting you on suspension and administrative leave. Which one is he going on? The fact that you're using the word suspension draws clear inference that you intended from the beginning to try and punish. That was coupled with the fact that the Prime Minister said the words that he said on television. We sit here not admitting and not accepting that Mr. Chi did anything wrong. But providing the ministry does what they're supposed to do, Mr. Chi will have his day before the commission and he will not go unrepresented. This is a phone call. It was very wrong of the Prime Minister to look at the public servant and say, you hung up the phone on me, especially in this digital era. The entire public, he has ostracized this officer. He really has ostracized this officer. Because when I read all the comments on Facebook, and Facebook somehow makes Belizean people experts now. Understand me? They're expert in everything.
Yep.
But the reality of the situation is, Mr. Chi deserves his day. And providing they do what they're supposed to do, he's going to have that day.
So the proper course of action should be administrative leave for the purpose of investigation to see if there was in fact an act of misconduct.
Not necessarily. When I put you on any kind of leave in the public service, administrative or suspension, I'm saying you cannot be in the workplace while I investigate this. In my mind, the use of the administrative leave amounts to an abuse. It amounts to an abuse because if this issue surrounds a phone call, please explain to me how Mr. Chi would affect an investigation.
How do you defend something like that? It literally becomes he says, he says. There's a phone call with no log, no recording.
Well, you know what, Marlene, what you're trying to have me do is to put out my commission case. And I am not going to do that.
But
Let me ask you this.
I'm going to simply say this. I'm going to simply say this. He who alleges must prove.
Burden of proof. Let me ask you this quickly, if you'll allow me though. So the call reportedly comes in from the Prime Minister to the public officer, asking for certain things to be done. In this case, to facilitate the importation of these plants. This is in the absence of the process that you outlined from the very beginning, that it goes from the CEO downwards. Could not the public officer have proceeded with facilitating but document the steps that he took in the event that anyone asks, this is the course of action that was taken based on the request made?
No, he should not. I'll preface that with a simple story. Some years ago, we had about 19 Central American presidents coming into Belize. I was the immigration officer at the airport, in charge of the airport. A particular family came off the plane with the Salvadorian president. They had nothing. They had a letter and about 4 or 5 crocker sack with some chattels in there. And I said, well, if you don't have a passport, you don't have a visa, you don't have a return ticket, you don't have per diem for all the days you'll be here, when that flight comes back at 2 o'clock, you will be returning. I proceeded to, I like straying around the airport. A certain minister called me. I'm instructing you. I said, no man, you have this thing all wrong. You don't instruct me. You instruct the minister responsible for immigration. Who shall instruct the CEO or the PS, whomever existed at that time? Who will instruct the director of immigration? The director will then instruct the person in charge of Belize, and then that person will instruct me. What public officers need to learn is that you are not beholden to a minister. I do not say that to say that you're to disrespect any minister. The office of any minister, the Prime Minister, ought to be respected. But you are guided by a public service regulation. And the public service regulation and the functions of your post tells you who your supervisor is. If a minister so desires that we break the law, because that is what it's tantamount to, then put that in writing to my HOD. Public officers are insulated so that ministers do not reach down and cherry pick who they want to do what. That is an epidemic, a disease of all governments. The ministers tend to want to speak to the bottom man. They speak about how bad the public service is. I will boldly say it is ministers and governments who have caused the public service to get the way it is.
Well, you know, I think quite a number of investigations have revealed how there is this direct contact that is made with public service officers when they effectively want to get things done. And I love the example that you use, because I think when we look back, we have always known this to be a problem. And if I reflect on conversations that we've been having with the Public Service Union for a long time as well, is that a part of changing that culture is having a strengthened public service. Your knowledge of the regulations at that time, where you could pat the brakes and say, the way to do it is this, rather than you telling me directly. What is the level of training that our public service officers have, knowledge of the regulations, so that someone like Mr. Chi or any other public servant right now who gets a call from a minister can know exactly how to handle the situation, that they have a strong case to come and say, I did nothing wrong?
Marlene, I'll say to you that training is always of good assistance. And I know that the public service within their clerical training does attempt to try and train. And I know that the union attempts to train by way of seminars. But let me tell you this. It is very, very unfortunate right now. This is not the public service I joined. This is certainly not the public service I joined. The issue of political interference at all levels, hiring, firings, has become a main meal. And even when public servants have been taught the regulations, there's always this innate fear. Fear because some of us have come into the door because of political hirings. So what do you come in with? The obligation to think that if the minister calls you, you have to do something. The obligation to think that if you see or perceive anything to be going wrong, you ought to call the minister and say something. But it will be a wonderful day in Belize when all public servants understand fully we are governed by the public service regulation, the government workers regulation, and whenever you have an issue, your first stop is what does the regulation say about it. Surrounding all of that is the Constitution of Belize. Everybody has a right to due process, and everybody has a right to associate. Nobody can call you into a position to do any unlawful instruction. What the Prime Minister would have requested of that officer amounts to an unlawful instruction, the way it came and what you're asking me to do. Had he wanted a facilitation, as you describe it, put it in writing. Because at the end of the day, when audit comes in and there's no record there to show why that officer took that course of action, who do you think will be on the guillotine?
And that's kind of one of the primary responses that we usually hear from the union, that you expect public officers to be able to ask for documentation for a request. What you mentioned though, Jackie, I think is the fundamental problem across the board. It is the risk of victimization or a perceived risk of victimization. What level of protection will I have if I in fact say to someone who is higher up on the chain of command, they ask me to do something and I say, well, sir, ma'am, please put it in writing for me. I am already feeling that I am putting my job and by extension my livelihood at risk.
Those permanent public officers must understand that it is the Public Service Commission who fires and hires. The persons who may find themselves in a little bit of trepidation would be those who are open vote workers. The issue of victimization is always going to be real. But as a public officer myself, having come from what I refer to as one of the toy department, and I call immigration toy, because both governments, when they want votes, nationality increases. When they want certain things to happen, they tend to want to pick up the phone and call. But as a public officer, one of the first things I learned was learn what your regulation is. Learn what your power is. Listen to me good. Victimization doesn't have color. It's not something I'm going to look in my file and see. Because ministers and sometimes their HOD is very smart not to put certain things in writing. But it can always be inferred by the treatment. For instance, some of the things they used to do with you is they'll put you in an isolation ward. We call it an isolation ward because what they do, they take a desk and put it to the back of the room. And that's where you're going to sit. Nobody wants to give you instructions. At one point, I was in an isolation ward in the public service, but I had fun with it. Because you see, failure to plan on your part doesn't represent an emergency on mine. My regulation said I'm to report to work every day. I reported to work sharp 8 every morning. The fact that you chose not to give me any instruction, that's not my problem. I'm at work and I'm being paid. I'm on a paid vacation at work. When my performance appraisal comes around, and that is the strength of it right there, you know. If public officers understood what performance appraisal meant and the kind of power they had by way of their regulations to say no, especially to unlawful instructions, they would shape up, they would read. I had a case at the commission where it was clear victimization. It's not under this administration, it was under the previous administration. The minister wanted certain things to be done in forestry. The officers followed the instructions of their HOD. But because both the minister and the CEO at the time could not get the officers to facilitate, and also because they wanted to go after the chief forest officer, they decided they would bring 13 charges against these officers. And everyone they won. I defended them, everyone they won. Why? It was clear victimization. It was if you didn't do what I wanted to do to help me to get rid of him, you became a problem. Yeah. And I urge the commission and I urge the Ministry of Public Service with everything in me, when that kind of issue arises, cut it loose. Because the documentation, no matter what happens in this country, you know, public officers needs to know the first line has to be something in writing. Yeah. You see, the Prime Minister could have talked all he wants on television. Unless Mr. Che had received something in writing, Mr. Che was not in any trap to be in any kind of punishment.
Let me ask you this. What I'm looking at from an outsider's point of view here is the fact that there exists within the public service a degree, perhaps a great degree of bureaucracy. If you're telling me that these are all the steps that I need to follow to get one simple thing done, then perhaps it's too many red tapes that need to be crossed. Maybe that's one perspective. And the fact that perhaps the Prime Minister himself attempted to circumvent all of these red tapes by going directly to the individual who he believed would have been able to handle the matter on the ground. Would you accept that perhaps to some degree there is bureaucracy that the average person would perhaps try to avoid?
Naturally, anybody who does business will try to avoid, but know this. If you set the law, I am to implement it. The public officer's role is to implement. It's not for the public officer to come and say, listen, no worry about a piece of law when you write this. So I want to help you over here. That's not the business of the public officer. So if the Prime Minister thinks that there is, we're not having the business facilitation that we need, that's why he has a cabinet and he has legislation. When he passes the law, we will implement it. So if the law is retarded, we will implement the retardation.
Let me input this also with that same matter. You talk about the bureaucracy, which would have caused delay. The importer was trained, and there's public pictures now showing her in that training of what to do to avoid these types of delays. She didn't do what she was supposed to do. So she's the person who caused any type of interruption, any type of delays. It wasn't the bureaucracy. It was her.
Well,
The country is committed internationally to these agreements. And it's not only in forestry. I come from Labor Department. We sign on to ILO conventions. We are committed to those conventions. As a matter of fact, uniquely, the Ministry of Labor have one of those laws that says any convention that we ratify has the force of law. So to just say that we don't have local legislation.
But there's also, and in most of our legislation, there's also that additional provision that says
The minister may.
The minister may, or on the provision, there's a provision, I can't remember the exact line right now, but it's in most of our laws.
And
Basically, all of these are the rules that we set forward, but the minister can still decide a different course.
And even though the minister may, through the HOD. The minister may not through the ordinary public officer.
So they can't jump.
No, they should not be jumping.
They
Listen,
can't or should not?
They should not be jumping. The reality of the situation is, I think the sooner governments realize that public servants are there to fulfill their obligation. Public servants take a lot of beating, you know, especially when people go into vital statistics and immigration and these never-ending lines. I mean, it treats people like cattle. But it's not the fault of the ministry. It's not the fault of the public servants. The reality is, we piecemeal too much in this country. Every time something goes wrong, like when something went wrong with our passport, now an ordinary Belizean have to have about 9 pages filled out before they get their passport. We piecemeal laws. The sooner they do a SWOT analysis of the government itself and determine how we go forward to create a better business environment, the easier services will be to deliver. Belizeans need to start asking themselves a simple question. Why is vital statistics the way it is? Do you think it's the public officers in there? Public officers don't write policy. We don't write laws. We deliver service.
I know there was a video last week, because I do think, and I can imagine you'll say it's demoralized due to resources, but we have seen time and time again where videos surface of inefficiencies in systems that can be prevented. So it's not, you know, I think there's accountability on both parts. It's being able to execute and follow protocols if they exist, and also recognizing that there is a chain of command. While some call it bureaucracy, other people can see it as the potential for checks and balances within our systems.
I think you can enjoy the best of both worlds. I think you can enjoy the best of both worlds. If you write clear policies, government need to stop writing policies at the top and raining them down at the bottom. Until you stand behind a vital statistics counter and truly try to deliver service, you really can't be writing policies. Perhaps the best way for government to go is to start saying, you know what, in each of these departments, I need you to do a retreat, I need you to do so and so, and then give me recommendations on how you think the service could be better, because I'm on the ground. I'm on the ground. And I'm glad you raised the issue of policy. I had another case at the commission, this time from the audit department. One of the charges given to the officer was failure to follow policy. But in all my read, I did not know what the policy was. So when I got to the commission, I said, before I determine what I want to do, can you indicate to me what policy we're referring to? You see, people say there's policy, there's protocol. We like to use these beautiful words.
They can't produce it.
But at the end of the day, can you show it to me in writing? Can you show it to me?
Has it been given to the officers who will execute the policy?
Exactly. You hardly have staff meetings. I bet if you walk in some of these offices and ask whether or not there have been staff meetings, there are meetings at this level, but how much of that is coming down to this level? You only know it. It is unfortunate that we're having a public service that has mutated into a penal community. All we want to do is penalize public officers. That's all we want to do. And that was the need, that was one of the need for this grievance policy.
Well, I'm glad, because I see it as such an important segue to this conversation. While there is, essentially, the union and the ministry are partners in being able to ensure that there is an effective public service in this country. You don't always see eye to eye, and that's understood, and you have your own mechanisms as to how you work. But coming together for this grievance manual, deciding essentially, and you can give me the details, that you both sign off and agree that this is the best course forward for public servants and the ministry. Let's talk about this process. How long has it been in formation?
Well, Sister Willoughby was the person who started penning the manual. From 2014, it was required as part of the regulations when the public service regulation came out in 2014. But as we were talking about how things are delayed, the policies and not put in place, and as far as I would want to understand it, it was the Ministry of Public Service who should have initiated this. But it took the union, through Sister Willoughby, to have started it. The exact year, I guess she could tell you. But
When we wrote you see, Marlene, somehow in Belize we don't like to face truths. No government wants the public service to be better because they need a scapegoat. They've always come in and piecemeal things to suit campaign donors and affluent people at the cost of the public officer, who immediately will be punished rather than complimenting. So when we begin the amendment of the 2014 PSR, which I have to say has amounted to much of a joke. Much of a joke because it created much fuss, and it was at a time that I was going back and forth to school as well. And half of what is in that regulations now, in some instances, is contradictory and an absolute joke.
We're talking about the manual or the regulations?
I'm segueing into that. But one of the things that did get in there was the issue of industrial relations. As Mr. Baba has indicated, we are a member of the ILO, and there are some beautiful conventions that really causes government to create the environment for unions and create the environment for fair treatment of workers, of which we are signatory to. We may not have ratified it and bring it into the force of law in Belize, but we still inferentially has that force of law because of case law that has proven that. So I indicated that I wanted an industrial relations section. And so we have in section 77 and 78 an industrial relations section. But in there I also said, out of that we must produce a manual. So I've been fighting ever since the regulation has been promulgated to try and get this grievance. So I said, you know what, this thing now will happen if I don't sit down and write it. So I got in my dark room and I wrote the regulations. And I've been pushing it to the public service, pushing it to the public service, pushing it to the public service. Towards the end of the last administration, we did start the work. Well, I presented something to them. But everything takes a year and a day in the public service. You think bureaucracy is only in the delivery of service? Bureaucracy is in getting your simple holiday. So I continue to push and I continue to push. And I'm sure that if Mr. Baba and Mr. Flores would go into the union office and show the amount of minutes that I ensured that it stayed on. And I produced 2 documents. I noticed that they only produced 1 here. But there were two documents. The regulation calls for the terms of reference of the committee, of the grievance committee, and then the procedures, the manual itself, what ought to be followed. And when this new administration came in, we continued to ask for it. We continued to say, listen, we need this to be promulgated. And this current administration, the current minister and his CEO said, well, you know what? Let's push on it. And this is what we have today.
What is the purpose of it?
So public officers would know how to start their matters. The Public Service and the Commission has found itself in a bottleneck because even HODs seem to have issues in how they read the regulation. The grievance manual is basically to deal with the application of the regulations. Now, let me draw a parallel for you. In section 83 of the current public service regulation, it says, where there's a minor misconduct, these are the things you ought to do. But would you believe it that still about 60% of minor misconduct goes to the commission? Why? Why should it go there? You have a manner in which to deal with it. Take a simple example like absent or late for work. You're late for work, or you're absent, or you're missing work, your AA or your AO should be saying to you, listen, I'm reviewing your records and this is what I'm seeing. Is there a problem? That's the nurturing part of the public service that we have lost. If you continue, I must warn you that I can take it out of your vacation, I'll take it out of your salary. But they sit back and in most instances do nothing. And then it becomes a disease, a virus. And what do they do then? Instead of dealing with the issue, they determine that they're going to send it off to the commission. So it creates a bottleneck. The grievance manual comes to address things like this.
So it's essentially like a lower level court system.
I don't know if I want to call it a court system.
Well, you don't have to call it court, but it's what we see in our court system.
It's giving the public officer the opportunity to address his concerns in writing to the HOD and giving the ministry the opportunity to solve that issue. And if they can't solve it, then they send it to the public service, and the public service, without the commission, attempts to try and bring some kind of resolve to it. That's what really the manual is doing. And I like, there's a portion of the manual that says, if I write something about you, I should not be victimized. I should not be prejudiced. Beautiful words.
What do you mean, write something about you?
If a public officer writes something, what public officers don't know is that they can write up their HOD, you know. They can write up their HOD. Long before a manual came out, I wrote up my first HOD. I wrote him up.
Basically complain about.
Yes, you're forcing me to do things I'm not supposed to do. You're asking me to do unlawful things. You don't want to put it in writing. That is not my role here. Of course, it saw me being transferred to PG. But I'm a public servant. And my regulation said I'm transferable. No, he didn't put in there that he's transferring me to PG because of that, you know. Because had he done that, I would say also it's a punitive measure. You see? But the reality is...
That happens across the board within the public service.
Well, that's part of the fear of victimization that we talk about, because you can be transferred.
You send somebody to Siberia because they don't comply with what you're asking them to do.
The reality is, I say to public officers, no, this is a good example of victimization. And I've said to public officers, what you need to do, if you're being transferred out of the transferred period, there's a process for transfer. From January to March 31st, I'm to be given a recommendation. I intend to transfer you, make yourself ready. The ministry then sends that to the public service, because it's not the ministry who will transfer you. They'll send it to the public service. The public service will probably look at the rotation, probably ask some questions and make the determination whether or not you should go. During this period, if a public officer does not wish to be transferred for whatever reason, because transfer should not create economic hardships, then they're to formally write and say, you know, it's not that I mind being transferred, but this year it is not good. I have 5 children in school, economic this, economic that, transfers to be this, transfers to be that. And they send it in. The Ministry of the Public Service would consider it. So if you are being told in the middle of September, you need to go, unless they say it's the exigency of the service, and tell me what that exigency is. Because in most instances, HODs think they are not supposed to tell you what the exigency is. And if you're sending me for the exigency of the service, in most instances, it is not for 3 years.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
It's for immediate short term.
Exactly. So again, it goes back to the public officer making the public service regulation their best friend.
Yeah, yeah. It's knowing the rules that you're governed by and how you can use it effectively. So this brings back the same grievance manual. So let's say I'm transferred in mid-September to Halakte. And is that a matter I would use the grievance procedure for, or would that go directly to the
That would
commission?
be a grievance issue.
Yes.
I wouldn't move. And my advice to public officers, don't move. It becomes an unlawful instruction if it did not happen within the period of time, or it is not an exigency. Don't move. Don't get up and go anywhere. When you transfer me like that, I don't move.
You're being uprooted from perhaps where you have made yourself comfortable, for instance. If you while the job allows you to be transferable, if you are in Belize City, for argument's sake, you have your kids, everybody's going to school, you're invested in Belize City, and it is outside of that particular period during which they're able to make the recommendation and then carry it out, then basically you're being uprooted and placed elsewhere on a whim.
And you're not supposed to be uprooted on a whim. The whole reason we have this transfer process is so that you would go and register your kids in school, you would go and find somewhere to live, you would try to fix the processes that you need to exist in somewhere else. So when you uproot me in the middle of September outside of a posting, then I would have to question, and I look at it very closely. In August, we had some kind of bangarang. I wrote, in accordance with the grievance manual, to ask that this matter be addressed to you, the HOD. And you decide who you can write me.
Yeah.
Here we go on. Somebody needed back a San Benito Pointe, you want to be the one. And September, you move me. Because of the closeness of the occurrences, you can see that it's victimization.
Well, it purports to show cause and effect, right?
You could be wrong, but you have enough proof
Well,
to
if
be
it
able
was
to do it.
exigency, you would have called me in and you would have said, listen, Miss Square got very ill. She will be out for the next 6 months. Do you think you would be able to hold that post for me for the next 6 months?
Yeah.
Because now that becomes an exigency.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? But you have to communicate with me.
Transfer either.
No, it's a posting.
It's a posting. There's another regulation that says they can post you initially for 3 months and for the maximum 6 months.
Yeah.
So you don't need to have a full transfer.
So I'm sure that public officers may be watching and having a lot of questions about this. And I want to bring that same question back to you. We speak of policies and how very often they don't trickle down to the people who need to know it the most or understand it the most. How do you ensure with this manual that takes place?
Everybody has a responsibility in the public service. The employer has the obligation to let you know what governs you. A man cannot regulate his behavior if he doesn't know what the law is. The public officer has his regulation, and the public officer must know that within his regulation, there is a section for circulars. They must take the responsibility to find out from their ministry, their supervisor, is there any new circular that I need to know about? Because you also have the obligation to educate yourself. This attitude that some of us have of not looking at the regulation can be detrimental to our causes. You understand what I'm saying? So you could train them 100%. The reality is you have got to take stock in yourself.
To assist in the process also, though, it was agreed between the union and the Ministry of Public Service that the document will be sent out electronically to every public officer who have an email with the public service. And that's nearly, must be 98% of the public officers. So
How difficult was it to have this agreement made between the ministry and the unions?
Initially, it was a problem. As I said, it started from the previous
Yeah.
administration, and with the greatest of respect, I don't like the post of CEO because the post of CEO, in my mind, is a political liaison.
Yeah.
I would have been more satisfied if I had seen that the government had created, like Jamaica, executive agents and kept the permanent secretary.
Yeah.
Because the CEO has a political duty, which is to his minister and in most instances to the minister and his constituency. That is where facilitation comes through the CEO. In terms of the public servant, making them accounting officer, in my mind, does not hold well with quote unquote their political purpose. Like, you open it for corruption. You have created a fabric for corruption.
I've heard this argument before about the return to the public
Yes.
permanent
The public
secretary, which we once had, and then it was shifted to the appointed CEO.
But the permanent secretary, what makes the permanent secretary better is it creates aspiration for the public officer to be able to matriculate all the way up there. So he would often be a person who has come through the public service and understand the administration of the public service. This is what's hurting us in Belize. Most of our CEOs, the CEO who wrote for Mr. Chi, by just the words written on that paper tells me he does not understand the administration of the public service, one. Two, and it may have appeared, and I'm using the word may very strongly because it could be so or not so, that the administrative officer therein did not advise him. But I'm not going to say that for definite because I know instances where administrative officer advises their CEO
And they still do
And
what
and
they
they
still
want.
still
based
do
on
what they want to do.
misinformation.
You see, why? Because they are a political liaison.
But let's bring it back though, because I think that the grievance manual is a step in the direction that we want to go in circumventing the challenges that we have persistently seen, where one, there's political interference, two, there is also some blame on the public servant part that they don't know their regulations or they don't follow through with how they know they can be protected. And let's not forget the very important group, the public, those who are at the mercy of the level of service that is provided for whatever reason, resources or personal investment in the work that they're doing. So when you look at the grievance manual, do you think this will in any way change or allow for an empowering of the public service in this country?
Let me go back a little. This grievance manual is simply a formalization of what is occurring. Even before this manual, we had a standing facility, started all the way back from when Mr. Gibson, Charles Gibson, was the CEO of the public service. We had a facility that every month we would meet with a list of grievances. So public officers have been writing their grievance. We pray now that what this will do is indeed to empower the officer, to cause the officer to know the kind of powers they have, one, and two, to bring back some respect to the public service. But let me tell you, it will not do it by itself. It will require all parties in the public service to understand their role. Understand me? And to have that merge in a kind of fluent way, and we respect each other. The public servant has been suffering disrespect at the hands of political operations for the longest. I've said to you in the beginning, you want an empowering, you want a change in the public service. Here's how you do it. Take each ministry and have them do a SWOT analysis of what they provide. Cause the stakeholders therein, which are the public servants who deliver the service. Cause the stakeholders therein to tell you how best we can deliver and stop creating piecemeal laws.
So where can people access the grievance manual? Is it easily accessible? You say you can be emailed out, but just in case they miss my email or spell it wrong.
The Public Service Union have a Facebook page. It will be published on that. For the members, it will also be placed in their respective WhatsApp group because the different branches have WhatsApp groups. So it should be easily available to all public
And if you don't
officers.
receive it,
And
ask for it.
as you said, you don't even have to be a member of the public service to access the website,
All right.
the Facebook page, that is.
All right. Well, we thank you for coming in and talking at length about some of the issues surrounding public service and also helping us understand the manual itself and the new process that it entails. Thank you.
Very well.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we are going to be talking to representatives of the Veterinary Association about Animal Health Week. So please stay tuned.
Technology is ubiquitous, and it's transforming how, when, and where we work. Full-Tech Systems is placing award-winning devices in the hands of information workers, allowing them to work without compromise in a world without wires, to innovate, create, and to maximize productivity anytime, anywhere, satisfying the needs of the desk-centric remote and field worker and every other worker in between. We are providing the industry's best devices to businesses going through the process of digital transformation. Partner with us today to provide the solutions that will allow your employees to work effectively and efficiently to enhance your customers' experience. Full-Tech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special SmartStream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with SmartStream.
Hola usuario de eCash, la aplicación eCash está disponible en español. Cambiar el idioma de tu aplicación de eCash de inglés a español es rápido y sencillo. Déjame mostrarte cómo se hace. Primero, abre tu aplicación eCash. Introduce tu PIN. Toca el icono More en la parte inferior de tu pantalla. Selecciona Security. Selecciona Language. Y luego selecciona Spanish. Vuelve a introducir tu PIN y ya está. Tu aplicación de eCash está ahora en español y puedes seguir disfrutando de tu cartera digital eCash. La aplicación eCash de Belize Bank te hace la vida más fácil.
Neymar and Messi is standing over this. Messi. Oh, what a goal from Lionel
Great entertainment stays with you, and we bring you great entertainment. Next Gen, the ultimate digital experience.
And welcome back. Our second segment is certainly a topic that I'm also looking forward to as we discuss Animal Health Week. I'm an animal lover. Gentlemen, we have in studio with us Dr. Fabian Tun. He's the Secretary of the Veterinary Association of Belize. Good morning.
Good morning.
We also have with us Dr. Philip DeShield. He's a member of the Veterinary Association of Belize. Good morning, Dr. DeShield.
Good morning. Good morning.
Animal Health Week. Very broad topic, considering that we're looking at agricultural animals, we're looking at domestic animals at home, and what have you. Where do we begin from?
I guess we can start with this being the first Animal Health Week in Belize. So this is the launch. So the Minister of Agriculture officially announced it on Saturday. So the week will run from Saturday into Friday. The start of the week was International Vet Day. And the end of the week will be actually Belize Vet Day. So it's nicely sandwiched between the two vet days. And the Vet Association is kind of taking on the mantle of kind of initiating the Animal Health Week. Hopefully every year it'll be an annual event, and it will get bigger and bigger and bigger, including many different sectors in agriculture and whatnot. But we're here really to focus on the veterinary aspect of animal health.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, it is, of course, a very unique profession, and I am most interested to know that we don't have enough vets in Belize. Tell us about the situation.
Yeah, well, it's actually about 34 registered vets as of 2021. And probably about 9 of them are not practicing or retired already. So the vet profession we're losing the vet profession. We don't have enough students studying as of now. I think it's about 3 that are studying the profession, and the last set of registered veterinarians was in I think it was in 2016.
Would you say that perhaps it's a lack of interest on the part of the student to pursue veterinary science, or is it perhaps not a lucrative enough career or profession to undertake when you come back into the world of work?
That's a good question. I think it's multifaceted why we don't have many. One is recognition that it is an option. A lot of times we're not presented with all the options in Belize, and we don't get exposed to the different opportunities we have.
Yeah.
A major issue is, for students in Belize is financially supporting yourself to go through school.
Yeah.
We don't have a veterinary school in Belize, so you have to go abroad, and that requires either support from your family, but also incredibly a lot of financial support. And the government and the ministries really haven't been offering veterinary scholarships. In the beginning, several decades ago, Belize would send vets out to study. I mean Belizeans out to study to become vets and then come back and practice, and that has really slowed down. So a lot of people have to take on the financial burden to go to school.
So
it's surprising when you think of institutions like Baja, for example, a critical role in animal health, and that's not just looking at it from trade perspective, but it's human health. Good animal health also ensures or helps to ensure good human health.
Yes, indeed, and I think that is one way we attract students to pursue it. Realize it's not as narrow. A lot of people have a very narrow view of what a veterinarian is. And part of this Animal Health Week, we want to expose other veterinarians that do more than just private practice.
Yeah.
So you can see the different facets of the profession and try to encourage students to pursue it.
You have 34 registered members as of 2021.
Yep.
9 of whom are not active at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's a very small number to begin with. When you look at all the needs of the country where those services are required, and the fact that those 25 doctors who are actually in operation are spread across the country, that's a hell of a lot of work for a few people.
Look at their faces.
Yeah, well, the work burden could be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go, we work a lot.
Well, I was gonna ask. I know both of you, of course, through working with domestic animals. But I know that your work goes beyond that. It's looking at wildlife and helping to save, rescue, treat wildlife. It's also looking at some of the animal health portions. Tell us the scope of the work that veterinarians do in Belize at the moment.
Well, on Friday, we're going to kind of launch something on Facebook where vets will introduce themselves and talk about what they do in Belize, so people can get an idea. But to give you just a broad view, like in Baja, we have a lot of regulatory vets. You know, it's a lot of paperwork, looking at animals being brought in, quarantine inspection. So you have that kind of production side in regulation. We have wildlife vets that work with different research organizations, that work with rehab facilities. We have vets that work in public health. So actually, in the human side as well, looking at vector-borne diseases, and they look at work in labs as well. I mean, it is quite broad.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you think that's part of it, that people maybe shied away saying, well, how many people are going to take their dog or cat to the vet? So, but your work goes far beyond that.
Yeah, it's far more than just cats and dogs. Like Dr. Phillips said, we do wildlife. We have wildlife vets. We should play a major role in animal production, and with animal production is not just the meat market, but the milk, the poultry, all of those are sectors that they and even in food security. So all of those are sections that vets play a major role, and we stand behind the scenes of these sectors.
How do you seek to attract the kind of attention that you would want from students, though, to be able to get them to study or pursue veterinary science down the road? How do you do that? Because it's dwindling. The numbers are well, they speak for themselves, but they're fairly low. How do you guys at this point now say, you know what, while we recognize the need for more vets, this is what we need to do to attract students?
Yeah, I mean, I do take partial blame. I think the Vet Association does take partial blame, and we're not really good at promoting ourselves and reaching out, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, that we are here. And as an association, we want to provide a good environment to facilitate growth of people who are interested or people that want to pursue the practice. Most of our interaction comes in our in private practice or on a day-to-day basis. So we interact with high school students through their school. They can do internships at various clinics, and we do fairs and whatnot for professional fairs to be out there. But we do need to step up the game and really highlight the profession, because there is a need. As difficult as the profession is, there is a need in Belize.
So what do you find are some of the factors that are holding people back? I'm sure you have little kids all the time say, oh, I want to be a vet when I grow up, or teens who come for internship. What leads them in that direction, and what discourages them?
Well, I think to tie two things together, every year International Vet Day has a theme. This theme is resilience. And I think if we talk about the issues that vets feel and being resilient, we can kind of see why certain people kind of shy away from it. So it's a lot of stress. So a lot of people don't want to do a profession that's very, very stressful. Sometimes you don't get much, accolades. You don't get that much notoriety. People say, but you're not a doctor, and so people want to be, a human health doctor, and so they want a little bit more accolades in their profession. yeah, a lot of people look down sometimes on the profession and the trade, and so we're trying to build that up so people are more interested in pursuing it. And I think that's one of the big issues.
And cost implications, let's talk about the average cost of vet school.
Yeah, vet school could be very expensive.
Yeah.
I studied in Cuba, and as a out of finance student, and
you paid for yourself in Cuba.
Yeah.
Did you try to get a scholarship, and it wasn't on
I got a scholarship from the government,
okay.
but it was from the Belizean government, and it was quite expensive.
Yeah.
Even if it was for the Belizean government.
Yeah.
But for, I think one of the major issues is economic, the cost of the career.
Mm-hmm.
And then students could get major debt when they come back from school. So.
And your options are Central America. The Caribbean has a veterinary school,
Mm-hmm.
and of course traveling to the U.S. Yeah. So most people are self-financing to become vets.
Yeah. I think the 3 students that are studying now are self-financed.
Is it possible for the association to lobby government to be able to return to some scholarship arrangement or what have you?
That's what we're trying to do, and we're starting it. So we're really trying to put it out there so that we can support and recruit more veterinarians.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, the vets are doing mostly private practice, volunteer work. I know with some of these rescue organizations. And then, how many vets are working in the public sector?
So most of the vets in the public sector will pretty much be through Baja.
Okay.
So the Ministry of Agriculture, I don't believe, hires any vets separate. All the vets that are hired in the public sector are through Baja. And Baja, I can't speak on behalf of Baja. I'm not here to talk about Baja, but they have certain mandates that they focus on.
Okay.
And so there are certain diseases that they're surveilling and whatnot, but for the general health, or you want a vet to come check out your farm animals, is not necessarily you call Baja. And that's the issue, because there's shortages in certain prime
So when I
areas.
have my cows, for example, I will actually call up private practice, a vet who's in private practice.
Yeah, so usually
you'll go out to farms.
We'll go out to farms, but the process is you contact a private vet, and then if it is something that Baja needs to inspect or one of those watch diseases that are on the list, then Baja will get in hand, and they'll kind of take over the situation.
So, okay, forgive me.
Wow.
When you look at the agriculture sector, you have all of these people who are invested in cattle, right? And it's one of the booming industries post-COVID or post the restrictions. There are a limited number of people you're going to call to deal with that, but meat production and what have you via cattle is something that the authority, like Baja, for instance, presides over something like that. But you have to go through private practice to get someone to look at your animal?
Yes. So, I mean, there are certain things Baja will oversee, and they'll be directly involved, and you don't go through private practice. But in isolated incidences, yes, ideally you'd call a vet, and that's the issue. There's not a lot of vets available, or people don't call vets, or they'll call paraprofessionals, or they'll do stuff on their own, which happens a lot of the time.
Yeah. I've always wondered that, aren't some of the medication for animals, shouldn't they be regulated so that I can't go buy it myself and try to do it on my animals?
Yeah, well, this is something that needs to be regulated.
Yeah.
And it's not just about purchasing medications. We need to think about antibiotic resistance, anti-helmintic resistance.
Yeah.
And basically right now, the industry is focusing on making a profit. And but we're not thinking long term on where anti-helmintics, for example, for parasites, we'll start gaining resistance, and then that industry will go down. It's happened before with sheep. The sheep industry was very big in Belize before, and it went down because of anti-helmintic resistance.
Which means they weren't responding to the medication
They weren't
for the
responding
parasites.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all that that indiscriminate the sales of antibiotics, we will get resistance eventually, and then the industry will go down. So.
I think this conversation alone is eye-opening to people, because we think of vets for domestic animals when you think of the horses, when we think of cattle, and very often we get warnings of diseases that are in neighboring countries that we have to be mindful of. Chickens as well, sheep, pig.
Yeah.
What other area are we talking about that we may not be aware of?
Well, even in aquaculture, fish farming and all of that, they use antibiotics. So those things need prescriptions, so they need a bit of vet oversight. And we have a small vet pool, and we need to build the capacity of the vets in country as well. And so I think this is the opportunity where the government should help fund, education and research and specialization in certain things like this, so that we can build our industries, because one disease comes through and the whole, as you see with shrimp.
I was going to say the first thing that came to mind was the bacteria that shut down all the shrimp farms. It was a few years back.
Right, so if you have more vets on the ground, maybe seeing things early stages, and there's more of a network, we can catch things earlier, rather than a lot of people will treat until things are out of hand, and then they'll call the vet when everything is failing, and then it doesn't look good on the profession. And so we're just trying to build resilience and build capacity of the veterinary community in Belize.
What is the role of the Veterinary Association, and how active is its membership in terms of lobbying efforts, in terms of public awareness, in terms of being able to look after the professional well-being of its membership?
So we're trying to strengthen it. As you said, we're a small group, 35 vets. So financially and time management is very, very difficult. Everyone is working a job and a half. So it's hard to find time to do things like this to get out there. But we realize the importance, as we're seeing a lot of our senior vets retiring, and they had all this expertise and knowledge that they had gained, and now we're seeing not as much incoming. It seems like we're going to enter a crisis stage, and we're trying to get on top of that before that happens. So we're trying to increase our lobbying effort. I don't think we've been very, very active before, but we always look to the future.
That's so interesting. Now, when you look at the this week itself, and you said there's an International Vet Day and there'll be a Belize Vet Day, it seems that there now is some level of awareness. How do you capitalize on this moving forward?
So for this week, we're just going to be posting a lot of things on social media right now. We're still, transitioning into live events. So right now, things will still be socially distant, and we're just trying to reach out on social media for this year. But we want to take it as an opportunity to let people know that we are here, and we're going to offer more things throughout the year through the Vet Association, and we'll prepare for next year starting now, so we can have more and more awareness every year.
Okay. Now, there's two sides to this coin, because there's also the area where a lot more people are embracing having domestic animals and caring for them properly. So where you have people who are bringing in animals for checkups and a little scratch here or a little change in behavior, you also still have other areas that have long existed. I mean, let's talk about the demographics here in Belize and just our changing views on animal health from your perspective.
Well, as for the change in our culture for treating our animals,
you're seeing that shift?
Yeah, we're seeing a shift, and especially here in the city, where dogs become more of a companion animal rather than just a guard dog for your yard.
Or chained in your yard.
Or chained in your yard. So we are seeing that shift, and people are changing that culture of oh, my dog is just a dog. Or my cat is just a cat to grab mice. So we have been seeing that change, and luckily we could, as the association, we could improve with all our networking and everything.
Yeah.
So in order for us to change that culture all over the country, and
So you have demand growing on both sides.
yeah,
With the existing needs and then this growing need where even, I mean, I know we talk with the Humane Society, they're inundated with phone calls from people asking for help with stray animals, but not enough people to take them in.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're short staff and financially shorted as well, and the demand is growing. So,
And people are paying for services, is that still?
I think people are caring more and budgeting a little bit more for their pets.
Okay.
There are still some issues where people will pay a lot of money for the pet and not for the care for the pet, which can be an issue. We see issues with breeders, like overbreeding and very expensive dogs being brought in, and there's no budgeting for the care for these dogs. But I do think people are caring more and understanding that it does have a cost, and they have to be mindful of that.
So why do you love the profession? Why did you decide to become a vet, and what keeps you doing it? Let's start with you, Doctor.
Yeah, well, I come from a small village in Cayo, and ever since I know myself, my father was in the agriculture business. So we used to grow pigs, we used to grow broiler chickens, and I think this is where all of this attracted my love to the profession.
Yeah.
And ever since I know myself, I want to be a vet, and I pursued this very diligent.
Yeah.
Because you need to be very very schooled, very straight in order for you to pursue this profession.
So farm life was your inspiration?
Yeah, I think so, and that's still my inspiration. I'm working with small animals, but I enjoy working with large animals.
You like going to the farms?
Yeah, that's my goal.
And for you? It's a legacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my father was a vet, so I was always surrounded by it, and I admired it. I admired his profession and how he went away. I tried to avoid it, to be honest. I liked it, but I wanted to do my own thing and be my own person, rebellious teenager or whatnot. But I always loved science. I always loved biochemistry and research, so I kind of pursued that. And then from there, I realized with the veterinary degree, I can still do that. The vet degree is very, very broad, and so it's multifaceted, so it works really well with the One Health concept, and I found that very, very inspiring. And so I love working with animals, I love science, I love medicine, so it just made sense.
Circling back to something that you said earlier though, where there's a notion that some people have that a vet is not a real doctor, so to speak. But then you look at that against the fact that there is a growing, perhaps more so now than before, love for domestic animals, right? To have pets, to have dogs or to have cats, exotic breeds and what have you, so that we need to go to the vet to have the vets take care of these animals. But we don't look at you as a proper or a real doctor because you're not dealing with human patients.
Yeah, so that can be a bit tough. I think it's how people perceive it historically and culturally from a long time ago. I think that will change for sure, and I think it is changing. We're just trying to speed up the process and try to evolve.
So the fundamental point I hear this morning is that for all the teenagers who are thinking about the profession, who are looking at a medical profession, this is definitely an area of need. And many different levels that you can work at, from working with domestic animals to farm animals to monitoring farms. There are many different ways you can utilize this type of education. All right. And I think you mentioned that people very often don't show enough appreciation to their vets. I'll tell you, I appreciate my vets all the time. You guys know that. But, it is important when we're able to say, and I think you said it, you're trying to get ahead of what can be a crisis very soon. as the older generation start to retire, and you'll have less vets to be able to move around and work.
Correct.
All right, so you said there's an open day coming up?
No, on Friday we'll be launching. It's just on Facebook.
Online.
Yeah, so you can look for the Veterinary Association.
Yeah, and during the week we're posting the different practices. So I think Animal Medical Center is posting a little video on practice. We've had clinics from down south as well, posting their clinics, all their practices, just for people to get a glance of what we have to offer. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us. Anything else you'd like to close with?
No, we just thank you once again for this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you too. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our final break. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So stay tuned.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special SmartStream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with SmartStream.
Your life just got a lot less complicated with Belize Bank Contactless MasterCard Debit Card. Introducing our Standard Debit and MasterCard Platinum Debit Cards. Now you can make purchases anywhere MasterCard is accepted with one tap, pay and go. Your contactless card never has to leave your hands, especially in these times. And your card is embedded with multiple layers of security. Platinum card holders get to enjoy extra benefits like price protection, purchase protection, trip inconvenience, and luggage protection, just to name a few. Start enjoying a cashless lifestyle today with the Belize Bank.
And we'll be back in a few, so stay tuned. Thanks, Jen. Hey there, we know you have to head out to work shortly, but don't forget that you can stay tuned by watching us on our Facebook live stream. Find us at Open Your Eyes BC, and you can continue watching there. You can also download Facebook Watch on your streaming device, and you can watch at your own convenience.
And for all the behind-the-scenes fun, follow us on Instagram at OYEBelize. So,
find us
and follow us
today.
Whether you're at home, on the road, at work, or at school, if you see news happening or suspect that something might be up, call or text the Channel 5 News Belize tip line at 672-5555. You don't have to give us your name, just give us the tip. That's 672-5555. Call or text us so we can check it out.
And we're back.
We're back. We had two completely different conversations. Enlightening nonetheless.
Now, it was great to have the conversation with the Public Service Union, Jackie Willoughby, who is a long-known active union member, and coming now talking from a legal perspective, and Mr. Barber as well for industry relations, talking about the grievance manual, but also shedding some light on the behind the scenes of the situation with Mr. Chi.
I think to get their perspective from the position where they have been involved with trade unionism all these many years. They know the intricacies of the act that govern public officers and the public service. I think to get that perspective sheds a lot more light than what we've been hearing from the political aspect of it.
Yeah. And you know what? I do appreciate her talking about how this has been such a long-standing issue. You know, as this comes to a head right now, and we're yet to see what will follow this administrative leave, it just brings to attention on both ends. One, there is a commitment to reduce corruption and what can lead to corruption in this country from the current administration. And there is a need for the public service to ensure that they are properly and adequately informed of the regulations that govern them. So I think the responsibility lies on both ends. And so hearing today that there's the introduction of the grievance manual and that process, and also understanding a bit of some of the cases they've seen and defended before, does help to bring that conversation more to the forefront.
And of course, our second topic with the Veterinary Association of Belize, I think what stood out to me immediately was the severe shortage of vets in practice, considering the fact that you have the industrial, so to speak, and you have the domestic aspect of the veterinary practice. And so just looking at the workload and the demand for veterinary services and the fact that there's so little of them, that's amazing, the kind of work they're doing.
It all started to make sense as they were having the conversation. I mean, you try to make an appointment with a vet, it's like, okay, we can see you 3 weeks from now. But I think what they have zeroed in on, which is critical, is that there's also a need on the national level for these types of trained professionals in being able to manage our agricultural sector. And so that shows that things like scholarships under the existing scholarship programs, whether that's through Taiwan or Cuba or other countries, that you can be able to put that as a priority area for education. Because that's what happens when people apply for scholarships. You have to fit into what are essentially the development priorities for the country. So if this isn't identified as a priority, I can't apply and then hope to get the scholarship, in some cases, not all. So that would be, I think, a government intervention that may be able to help.
Hence the reason for lobbying, because the association, in my opinion, would lobby the government to make this an essential part or a priority. And then the government, in its relations with other countries, like for instance, you've mentioned Taiwan, the fact that there's that close relationship, then they would be able to say, you know what, we need to have trained more vets, more students who are pursuing this particular academic field of, academic area of study, and then create the scholarships to go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do appreciate that they came in to tell us all about it, and it is Animal Health Week, and you know, I think one of the key facts is that, and it's unbeknown to me because I do genuinely appreciate my vets, and you know, when I go there, it's very important because I'm a dog lover, take care of my animals as best as I can, but how very often they feel that they are dismissed as not real medical professionals. So do show some appreciation to your vets as well as we celebrate Animal Health Week.
There we go.
All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. If you would like to contact us, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com. Find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ and on Instagram at OYEBelieves. Remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 when you open your eyes.
To start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
and your hearts open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, please.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.